Well, hello everybody, and welcome to today's episode of the MMA webinar series. Today we have a sponsored webinar brought to you by Dataxu, and the title today is 3 Tips to Make Mobile Marketing Better Through Data Science. Before we get started and hear from our guest speaker today, let me walk you through a few of the details about the MMA. First, as you know, the MMA is a global trade group focused on mobile. We serve chief marketers and their supporting staff and partners. Our reason for being is to accelerate the transformation and innovation of marketing through mobile, driving business growth with closer and stronger consumer engagement. We do that by leaning on our 4 pillars: cultivating inspiration, building capability for success, demonstrating measurement and impact, and advocacy. Our members range from American Express to Walmart on the brand side, from Google and Facebook on the publisher side, agencies like Group M, clients like Unilever and Mondelez. So we have every major constituent in the mobile marketing ecosystem, and we're glad to have them. We're a global organization, and we'll be managing your questions today because we do have questions coming in from around the globe. You can share the insights with the hashtag MMAWeb, and you can follow Dataxu or at MMA Global. There are a couple of questions that people like to ask, and I answer those before we get started. Will the presentation be available for later download, and will the webinar be available for later viewing? The answer to both is yes. And everyone who registers for this webinar will receive a follow-up email with a link to both. Also, you can feel free to ask questions. There is a drop-down menu or drop-down tab in the control panel to your right. You can put questions in there, and at the end of the presentation, we may get to an opportunity to answer some of those questions. If we don't, and you pose a question, know this, that the sponsor gets all the questions and your contact details, and they will follow up with the questioner as appropriate. So don't hesitate to ask any question you'd like, and we hope we can get to them. Today, our presenter is DENISE HOTTA, the Associate Product Manager at Dataxu. I'm your moderator, Leo Stellan of the Mobile Marketing Association. And today, top-line agenda for DENISE is mobile, and then the multi-device consumer, how cross-device measurement is done, reaching the multi-device consumer, messaging matters, and then the Q&A. So without further ado, welcome DENISE HOTTA.
Great. Thank you, Leo, for the introduction, and thank you so much to the MMA for hosting Dataxu today. We're really excited to be here to talk about mobile and specifically its role in a multi-device world. So before I begin, I wanted to give just a brief overview of Dataxu to give you some sort of background about where we all began. So Dataxu was founded in 2007 by a team of MIT-educated aeronautics and astronautics scientists who actually wrote some of the language that guided NASA's Mars mission plans. So following their success up in space, the MIT team looked at other ways that they could use this algorithmic technology, and here's where they uncovered an emerging opportunity in digital marketing. So in the early days of programmatic marketing, if anyone here remembers, they were characterized by a lot of manual solutions, a lot of inefficient and disconnected supply chain dynamics, and in general just a fundamental misunderstanding of how we could use big data. So the Dataxu founding team assembled a diverse group of entrepreneurs and digital marketing experts to build solutions that address these foundational flaws. So under these guiding principles, Dataxu launched its demand-side platform in 2009 with the goal of bringing data science to the world of marketing. And Dataxu was also the first mobile DSP, making mobile a fundamental piece of our strategy right from the start. So the goal of today's session is to share some insights on how to leverage data to improve mobile marketing, but particularly in a multi-diverse device world. So to do this, we have to first understand how our consumers are interacting with mobile today, the challenges we face with the introduction of other devices, and also what we can do to overcome them. So over the past couple of years, we've all seen some statistics and charts similar to these that basically show that mobile growth is continuing to rise. And within Dataxu, we see the same trends where spend on mobile continues to skyrocket. And it's no longer just a sort of nice to have. So our campaign data here is showing us that mobile volume by quarter has increased drastically, particularly in the past few years. So you can see here on the chart that from 2015 to 2016, we saw a 221% increase in mobile volume. The need for a constant connection has never been more obvious than it is today. And I think that mobile is the device that allows consumers to access that connection whenever and wherever they want. What we've done is we've created a truly on-demand digital landscape where consumers are constantly engaged with their devices. In fact, some of these stats show that we see a world where consumers can't get enough mobile. So according to a ComScore study, we saw that 58% of people would rather ditch booze for a week than their mobile internet access. 75% said they would never consider leaving home without it, and 80% of mobile users sleep with their smartphones nearby. So we know and we trust that mobile is the place to be. So we know that mobile is key, but really what about it makes it worthwhile to us as marketers? So one of the key benefits is the personalization that mobile provides to us. Mobile is a device that isn't static, and it's perceived as one of the most personal mediums. It's a device that people always have on them, which makes it one that we're able to maximize most to personalize content to fit the user's current state and time. Another area is its opportunity for interactivity. So all of the pinching and tapping and swiping, all of the interactions that are available on our devices allow us to create innovative formats that we can reach our consumers. These are formats and experiences that aren't necessarily available on desktop. And lastly, branding. Mobile is a huge part of a brand strategy. In fact, more consumers consume video content on mobile than on display. So throughout this webinar, as I mentioned, I'm really going to be focusing on a theme that is extremely prevalent today, which is the multi-device consumer. How can we use data to connect the dots from mobile to other devices that a consumer has? It's really not just about mobile. We have to think about laptop, tablet, even TV, game console. So what are the challenges here, and how do we make this more seamless? So the average American owns more than 3 devices, meaning people are more connected than ever. 90% of people in the U.S. use multiple screens a day, and 41% of multi-device users switch devices to continue the same task. What I mean by that is, for example, you may see an ad for concert tickets on your smartphone while you're out with some friends. Now, you may not purchase those tickets right there and then, but later on you'll open your laptop, remember that ad, and search for the band and venue that was marketed to you. So mobile and tablet devices are accounting for a much larger portion of our digital media mix, and that brings to light many challenges for marketers when it comes to targeting and measuring consumers across all of their different devices. So to drive this point home, I want you to try to picture your own typical day and how you interact with all of your devices. For me personally, the typical day, I wake up, I pull CNN.com on my smartphone in bed to check the news. On my way to work, I may browse through my phone, through the latest trends in fashion, on my favorite blog, or on Instagram. And then throughout the day, I'm on my laptop at work, but I may check in on some highlights from a game I missed, or maybe even some email. And then in the evening, generally, I'll settle on my couch in front of the TV with my tablet to finish the night off. So if you think about your own day, it's really no secret that today's consumers are all multi-device. And despite us switching across multiple devices, we still expect a personalized experience throughout our consumer journey with a brand. This creates several challenges for us, which I'll sort of outline throughout the webinar. But the first is that when we're relying on a single device marketing method, we miss out on opportunities to reach users on other devices. So a consumer may visit our website on their laptop device, but now we're only limited to reaching them on that device. In a single device world, we're missing out on reaching them on their mobile or on their tablet until we're able to capture that user into our retargeting pool directly on those devices. The solution to this fragmentation and opportunity costs lie in cross-device solutions that allow us to break down those barriers and then start to market to people rather than cookies or devices. And by doing this, it allows us to reach and measure our audiences agnostic of channel. So right now I want to take some time to go into the data and the details of how this is done and describe a little bit more about how we use data to achieve this. So cross-device solutions leverage what is known as a device graph in order to connect the dots across devices. So what is a graph? There are two definitions of graphs that are commonly used. So the one that you may hear the most about, it refers to a line chart or a scatter chart, some sort of visualization of data. Now, I, on the other hand, am going to be talking about the formal mathematical term graph. So a mathematical graph is an ordered pair of vertices and edges, V and E, as represented in this visual here. And vertices are joined together with different edges. In the context of cross-device marketing, we have a vertex that represents a person, and then that person is connected to three devices, which are the edges. The edges represent these connections. So for this particular person, we have connections to her laptop, iPhone, and tablet in her individual device graph. There are a couple main ways that we use data to make these connections to connect a user to their various devices. So the first way is what's known as deterministic data. So this is login data that is used to identify that two or more devices belong to the same user. So for example, if I logged into the same social site on my iPhone and used those same login credentials on my iPad, we now know that those two devices belong to me. So my device graph now consists of my iPhone as well as my iPad. A second way is to use probabilistic data. So developing these links is more of a statistical approach that looks at data and creates some sort of predictive model about the relationship between devices. So it's no longer given or deterministic like login data is, and instead relies on looking at patterns to determine if two devices belong to the same person. So a common example of this is tracking the IP address of two devices. If we see that they connect to the same Wi-Fi router, which indicates your home location, and then they both connect to the same Wi-Fi location at work, then at home, then at work, a pattern develops and we can make an educated guess that those two devices likely belong to the same person. Now we can't be 100% sure like we are with login data, but it's more likely than not that it is the same person. And then lastly, the third type of links is based on proprietary data. So this is data that a brand can bring on to their own device graph. So for example, if your brand has your own apps or websites, you may already have cross-device data. You can then bring this data into your device graph to create even more connections. So then what? So what do we do with this once we have that graph data? So when we collect data on all of these devices, using the graph, we can then combine the data to target and measure that person across all of her devices. So it no longer becomes data that's siloed to one device. We can actually combine all of that data together and reach that user across all of their devices. So a good example of this is tracking a user's movement from, let's say, an iPhone to a laptop device, which I think is a common use case that we tend to see. So we can see here that this user was exposed to an ad on her iPhone, and then they purchased a product on her laptop. We can then, using the graph data, conclude that that's the same person and give that iPhone the credit for a conversion that actually occurred on another device. This brings me to my next section, which is centered around cross-channel measurement and how we can use this graph data to track consumer path to purchase across devices. Ultimately, this helps provide a more accurate view into mobile performance specifically, where we do see a lot of that switching of devices in order to complete a conversion. So in a single device world, we also run into the problem of losing track of consumers across devices from a measurement perspective as well. In this world, there isn't really a universal connection across all of an individual's devices, and each device has its own form of identification that don't communicate with each other, and this creates a very siloed view of the consumer. So as a result, marketers lose track of consumers as they switch between devices throughout the day. And the result is a fragmented view that fails to illustrate the full and true customer journey. So, in this view, we may not see that the user actually converted on a mobile device, and thus we may write mobile off as an ineffective medium. But this is hardly the case. In fact, we've seen that 80% of the time people are switching to their laptop devices in order to complete an online purchase. So this means that cross-channel measurement is necessary in order to really understand how mobile is contributing to your overall strategy. So again, if you sort of think about how you may interact with your mobile device versus your laptop, and you can really tell that delivering an ad through a mobile phone is actually a great way to reach your consumer. For example, the other day, I saw an ad for a pair of sunglasses on my phone while I was on my way to work. So I ended up shutting down my phone once I got to work, but later in the day, I remembered that ad and opened my laptop to search for the brand and eventually bought those sunglasses. It was just that it was on my laptop device. So this sort of proves that cross-device attribution insights really provide exactly what we need here in order to fully understand and gain confidence in mobile as a vital piece of our puzzle. So an example of this kind of cross-device measurement can be seen here, which are the results for a consumer technology retailer that we worked with, where they were able to gain visibility into 3x the number of conversions with cross-device insights. So while their campaign, as you can see here in this bar chart here, while their campaign was targeted 100% to smartphone and tablets, you'll see that almost 70% of the conversions that were attributed to this campaign actually occurred on a desktop or laptop computer as opposed to a mobile. So in general, we see this a lot. We see this a lot with our advertisers that are using cross-device, where even if it's a mobile campaign, a majority of the conversions that are eventually attributed to those mobile impressions are actually occurring on another device, namely a laptop device. So it's kind of crazy to think that without the cross-device insights, this client would have missed out on 70% of conversions that the mobile impressions deserved credit for. So essentially, a single device view of your campaigns undervalues mobile impressions, and unfairly so. So we saw this again, this challenge firsthand with House of Blues, who had the challenge of appealing to a large millennial fan base, which means a lot of heavy mobile users. They also dealt with the same problem of a fragmented consumer attention. So cross-device insights essentially provided House of Blues with the confidence it needed to increase mobile investment. Using cross-device attribution, House of Blues measured 140% more conversions that traditional attribution would have otherwise ignored. So our cross-device insights showed them how their mobile investments were converting and gave them the confidence to reallocate budget across their channels. So this cross-device solution not only provided House of Blues with the confidence in mobile they needed, but it also allowed them to extend their audience reach on mobile by extending past cookie IDs to target. And this is something we'll touch on in a couple slides, so we can go over that in a bit more detail in a second. But basically, in light of this information, House of Blues doubled their investment in mobile to 30%, and generated a 60% increase in sales revenue while maintaining the same overall media investment. So another way we can use device graph data is to reach our users across their devices and amplify our reach on mobile devices specifically. So using our graph data, we are able to take some sort of seed audience pool and then extend it to other devices. So this could be, taking a smartphone seed pool and extending it to laptop and tablet. It could be taking a laptop pool and extending it to mobile and tablet. Generally, the case is that we see a lot of seed audiences on laptop that are growing into mobile just because we don't have as many cookies available to us on mobile devices. So, for example, users may visit your website on a single device, such as their laptop, and then using device graph data, we can find additional devices that are connected to those same users to enable marketing on other devices like smartphones and tablet. We are essentially using visitors to your site as a seed audience and then growing that into an audience that reaches across devices. So we saw exactly this with the Dataxu account. So as seen in this sample audience segment, so this was for a beauty retailer, enabling cross-device targeting provided 3x times the reach in devices. So our device graph data linked users with multiple identifiers, creating a stronger connection that didn't just rely on cookies. So you can see with this device graph data that we can take a pool of 100,000 devices and grow that 3x. This enables better targeting across all of our devices, especially in mobile, where activating data has been particularly challenging. So here you can see that a pool of only 2,000 mobile cookies was eventually grown to 270,000 mobile IDs. This creates an enormous opportunity for growth in our mobile strategy, and particularly in audience targeting on mobile. So we faced a similar challenge at Dataxu with a music streaming company that had a highly distributed group of multi-device customers. The challenge was to connect with their users across all of these devices, but also identify new potential customers in a more scalable and efficient way. So we needed to find new ways of engaging existing users and driving efficient user acquisition at scale. So this is where we can combine some sort of tailored messaging and cross-device graph data to create more relevant and efficient mobile marketing. So what we did was we worked with the brand and their partners to ingest various forms of mobile user data into our Dataxu platform to target and also anti-target against. So once the mobile and cookie data was ingested, we applied our device graph data to find additional devices that fit into those user bases. We connected these devices to members of the original audience and amplified the size of that group. So this allowed the brand to build complete and cross-device audiences across their entire user base. So there were three groups of users that we were able to identify and narrow in on using the brand's own mobile app user data. So one group was active app users, another was app downloaders, and then finally inactive app users. We were then able to take these pools and using device graph data, extend them across other devices to maximize our reach. So a key part of this story is also to start creating consistent and effective messaging to mobile devices and beyond. Users are more connected to our mobile devices than ever. We've already talked about that. And it's making mobile an essential way to reach your customer at any time. So a vital part of this strategy is learning how to adjust your message accordingly. So in this section, we'll discuss some ways that you can use this type of data to tailor your creative messaging to consumers on mobile devices and beyond. So we'll revisit the issue again with single device marketing in that it makes marketers marketers could be reaching their consumers on all devices and they just don't know it. So this leads to a marketing strategy that, again, is marketing to devices rather than to people. And you can end up with a strategy which is messaging can appear fragmented to the consumer. For example, you may continue to serve a prospecting message to a user on their tablet device because you are unaware that that user actually already has downloaded your app. So I'll go back to our last case study. So in our last example, we were able to use device graph data to extend various brand mobile app data into other devices to create a more holistic target audience across all of our devices. These audiences were then leveraged for a number of different use cases in order to create more consistent and effective messaging across these devices. So the first area was using brands' own data of users who had already downloaded their app, and we call this sort of the exclusion bucket. We excluded this audience from receiving any sort of acquisition-based or prospecting-type messaging across all of their connected devices to increase our media efficiency. So not only did we block this user from getting prospecting messaging on their mobile device, using graph data, we were also able to extend that to their laptop or tablet so that they weren't getting any prospecting messaging anywhere on their devices. The second part was re-engagement. So this was the user base of lapsed users who were segmented and then retargeted with re-engagement messaging across devices. So this was really about targeting users who had not used the app in a while, and we wanted to re-engage them with some sort of specific messaging. And again, using the device data, we were able to extend that messaging not only to mobile, but also across all of the devices that were connected to that particular user. And then finally, loyalty messaging. So this was really targeting loyal or current customers that were active on the app and targeting them with additional offers, incentives, or partnership-based messaging. And again, to drive the point home, this was all done across all of the devices that were connected to that particular user. So ultimately, all of these, the addition of the brand's own mobile app data, as well as segmenting these users into specific messaging, delivered an 82% decline in cost per acquisition. So using a similar approach to the music streaming brand, the sales funnel is a great way for you to understand how to tailor your messaging depending on where the user lies. So we can use this type of data to understand what kind of messaging would be the most effective depending on where the user is. Again, mobile in particular is a great place to do this because a mobile device is a sort of extension of a person at this point where it's always on them and we can always reach them wherever they are. So it's really up to us to use the data available to us to understand exactly where they live in the sales funnel and then how to market to them appropriately. So, for example, during the awareness stage, we can use prospecting type messaging and also leverage formats like video, which create a more emotional appeal for new clients. And then later on towards the conversion stage, we start to move into more tactical type messaging with clearer calls to action. So it's important to not only create a consistent message, but also an effective one. Because mobile, again, is a device that can be viewed as always on, we need to be smart about what kind of message we're delivering to that user at the exact time and place. So one of the steps to do this is to understand how consumers are using mobile devices in order to understand what type of messaging makes sense. So what type of content are they looking at on each of these devices? What kind of mood would they be in when they're browsing these devices? What time of day is it? What day of week it is? These types of questions are key for understanding how to drive more message relevancy. So in this graph, it shows us that devices like connected TVs, laptops, and tablets are most used to watch movies and TV shows, and then smartphones, on the other hand, are used to watch more user-generated short clips and read things like the news or the weather. So that means that shorter form messaging would fit in more here. So another thing that mobile offers is unique targeting benefits for reaching consumers sort of on the go. A lot of these audiences can be hard to find in the real world, so reaching them in locations relevant to your business is really beneficial. So 73% of smartphone users are more likely to click on an ad that is locally relevant. And 4 in 5 shoppers will use their devices simultaneously while shopping. This provides a really great opportunity to create highly relevant messaging based on location. So geofencing is a more specific way that we can bring geo capabilities even further. So essentially we target a specific point of interest right down to the lat long, and we can ensure that we're reaching our target in or near locations that are relevant to your message. So one way of leveraging this is by targeting audiences near your own store or perhaps even a competitor store, and then tailoring your message to their mobile phones accordingly. Another way we could do this is to identify some auto-intenders around dealerships to message them to sales events or some sort of deals at the dealership as well. So in this session, we've talked about how to leverage different types of data to tap into a more efficient, enticing, and true mobile world, a world that reflects the multi-device consumer with much more accuracy. So we looked into a multi-device world with mobile as a star player. Leveraging device graph data here is vital to increasing your audience reach across your devices and particularly on mobile. So as a reminder, just to throw out a stat again, in one case we were able to take a seed audience of 100,000 laptop users and grow that into a pool of 270,000 mobile IDs. When we connect the dots, we are that much stronger. It's also key to understand the true performance measurement, one that is able to track a user from one device to another. We can no longer rely on traditional data points to drive our mobile marketing strategy because it's one that often undervalues mobile. So we need to stop ignoring this data when we talk about the value of mobile. And lastly, when we do connect the dots, we are able to start delivering a more consistent messaging strategy across devices. So for the music streaming company, leveraging their own mobile data from app installs helped them become more efficient in their messaging and media buying, and ultimately led to an 84% decline in cost per acquisition. We can also start to think about other data such as location data or sales funnel data that can be used to appeal on a device that can reach our consumers anywhere and anytime. So I think we all know that mobile is extremely important, and hopefully we've now convinced you that cross-device is a vital piece of our mobile puzzle as well. Thank you all for your time today, and I'll open it up for questions now from the audience.
Great. Thanks very much, Denise. That was a great presentation, very thorough and very insightful. We have just a few questions. That last streaming case you mentioned, how was the app install data the game changer? And is this a trend you see many marketers moving towards?
Yeah, definitely. So we're definitely seeing more advertisers leveraging this type of data because it is such valuable data that previously we weren't able to, tap into as efficiently. So before it was difficult to track anything that we had seen on an app due to lack of cookies there. But now we're able to track these devices with other IDs such as device IDs to determine users who have already had an app installed. So for the music streaming brand, that was really vital in creating a more efficient media strategy because we were no longer wasting dollars on users who already had this app installed. So, if you think about it, a lot of the methods that we use to go get new customers for brands rely on characteristics we know about current users or current converters. So if we aren't efficiently anti-targeting the users who already fit into this pool, this pool of app installers, it's likely we're going to be reaching them with some prospecting message. So this was a really key part of our strategy with this music streaming company to more efficiently buy media.
Great. We suspect you're seeing a lot of mobile-only campaigns, and one of our audience members asked a pertinent question. Is being a mobile DSP now one of Dataxu's top priorities? And are you now looking to acquire even more mobile supply? And what data would you like to see to consider inventory relevant?
Sure, yeah. So, yeah, we're always, I think everyone in the industry is always talking about mobile and the importance of mobile. So definitely we are looking to increase our mobile offering. I think we've put a lot of investment into our cross-device solution, which helps boost up mobile a ton. So we've really spent a lot of time not only talking about mobile, but mostly about cross-device and understanding the full story from laptop to smartphone to tablet to TV. Bringing in connected TV has been a major part too. So while mobile is a big part of it, I think the overall story is really around cross-device and around how do we connect the dots across all of these different devices that people are using on their day-to-day.
Tell me, when it comes to cross-device, are there certain industries or even certain audiences that are more forward-leaning with cross-device adoption?
Yeah, I think the adoption has been pretty widespread because I think cross-device appeals to different industries and different goals in different ways. So the more performance-focused industries where there's a conversion funnel, so retail, even auto, they find a ton of value in gaining more insight into the consumer path to purchase. So where are consumers actually purchasing? Are the ads that I show on tablet effective in driving them to the purchase? All of that comes with our cross-device insights. And so as we've mentioned a lot already in this deck, cross-device insights has given them a bit more accurate of a view of what's happening from when a user first sees the ad to when they complete the conversion. Now, on the other hand, more branding type clients also have value in cross-device. It's just a little bit different in that it's more about how they're able to control their message a bit more across devices. And we also start to think about, frequency capping across devices, which is also key for brand clients. So, we're seeing a little bit of both. I would say for our brand clients, we're coming out with new features that appeal more to them, whereas previously it was a lot to do with performance and a lot centered around performance. But with things like frequency capping across devices, our brand clients in CPG are starting to perk up a little bit more.
That's good. Is frequency capping a special challenge in cross-device? I mean, I suspect it is, but does your particular approach really help overcome that challenge?
Yeah, so frequency capping, for the most part in the past has really relied on cookie data, cookie IDs to frequency cap, which has never been as effective just knowing that a user could have multiple cookies attached to them and knowing how we aren't able to see cookies that often. So with cross-device frequency capping and with person-based frequency capping, we're able to take a step away from that a little bit and rely less on cookies to frequency cap and rely more on a persistent ID in order to frequency cap, which makes it that much more effective. There are still obviously challenges, but we're at least moving closer to a state where we're not simply reaching a cookie ID multiple times.
Great, great. Well, Cliff, this has been terrific. That's it for the questions now, but thanks, Denise HOTTA, for presenting some really great information and following up with some good answers. Before we sign off, folks, just a few more things about the MMA. Our webinar series continues next week. There's a webinar on navigating location-based marketing. We have an event next week as well, one of our premier events, the CEO and CMO Summit. We have a forum in Colombia in August 9th and a forum in Shanghai September 2nd, and we have a host of other activities coming in October, November, and December. More on those later. If you are a member of the MMA, you can take a seat at the table and join any of our programs. We have 10 or more programs at work at all times, and we welcome any and all members to participate in the dialogue and the outputs that we produce. Whether you're a member or not, you can participate in the conversation through our newsletters, our insights, our LinkedIn groups, and our social connections as well. You can get great at mobile by studying our case study hub or looking through our mobile marketing playbook. We issue great guidance reports and benchmarks, and we have a wonderful webinar library. So without further ado, thanks very much for coming today, folks, and we'll see you next time. Bye. Thanks, Denise.